A national football expert is just wrong about Ole Miss this year, and I don't think it necessarily is his fault. I'll explain. This is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, the most watched Ole Miss podcast around. I am your host, Steven Willis, a 10-year veteran member of the national media and a former Ole Miss staff member. On today's show, we talk about how fixing in-state recruiting is an easy fix if Lane Kiffin is willing to do it. Ole Miss actually has some built-in advantages in state, and it's time that Ole Miss starts using them. We'll also break down who is likely going to be the next recruit to commit. We'll talk about Deuce Geralds. It should be a really good segment. But first, we will open with a college football expert completely disrespecting the Ole Miss Rebels in his latest SEC rankings. And no, that will not be tolerated. We're free and available on all the podcast apps and on YouTube. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen every day. And a special hello to the everydayers who make this show what it is. Do us a favor, like, subscribe, and comment to the video. It costs nothing to do that, but it helps keeps this show free, this channel free essentially as well. And don't forget to check out a second listen on the network. Nearly every team, college or pro, is there for your choosing and is ready for you. This episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE, all one word, at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's Monarch Money. All right. So I was going to do a Cruit and Chatter episode today to where we talked about Deuce Geralds and Craig Tutt and all of that, show some highlights of Tutt and all of that. And we're still going to get to that in the next segment. But I want to start with a list put together by Spencer McLaughlin at Locked On College Football. I highly recommend everybody subscribing and paying attention to Locked On College Football. He's just wrong about this pick. He kind of is going brand and traditional and kind of taking the safe route in his selections in the SEC. It's hard to do Locked On College Football. There's too many teams for any one person to kind of keep an eye on. That's the reason in the Locked On Network, there's all of us to where we do just one team. But Ole Miss is in a better shape than he is willing to admit. Let's just show up the list real quick. Here is the Locked On College Football Conference rankings for the Southeastern Conference. This is Spencer McLaughlin, Locked On College Football. It's not Chris Gordy at Locked On SEC. He's going with Georgia, Texas, Alabama, and LSU. Picking brands, right? That's what they're doing there. They're just picking brands. Okay, this one, and this one. They're always at the top. Let's just throw them there in some order, and that's how we'll pick them. South Carolina has Lenore Sellers, okay? And they thinking that South Carolina, after their hot streak at the end of the year, is going to be able to carry that over into the season, which they're not going to do. That's the top third, essentially, of the Southeastern Conference. The middle of the pack is what he thinks Ole Miss is going to be in, and that is with Florida, Texas A&M, Tennessee, and Oklahoma. Ole Miss beat Oklahoma, absolutely drubbed South Carolina a year ago, but Oklahoma is preseason rated ahead of Ole Miss. Why? Brand. We always talk about national media personnel, taking the easy way out, being level in the name of objectivity. Sitting here talking about what's going on. They're just picking brands of where they think they're going to fit. Listen, I like Spencer. I'm going to be on this podcast if Ole Miss is relevant this season multiple times. I have no problem with everything. I have a big problem with this take. For instance, he has Missouri at number 11. Why does he have Missouri at number 11? They've been right there with Ole Miss. Ole Miss has had 3 10-win seasons in the last 4 years. Missouri's right there with Ole Miss. When Ole Miss went to the Peach Bowl and played Penn State and beat Penn State, Missouri went to the Cotton Bowl and beat Ohio State. Missouri and Elijah Drinkwitz have something going. Why are they picked 11th? It's because of brand. The benefit of the doubt on this list goes to brand in each and every case, with the exception of maybe Vanderbilt, who's much too low on this list. They went to a bowl game a year ago and completely blew out Georgia Tech. He has Vanderbilt at number 13. Why? Brand. Everything on these preseason lists, whenever somebody doesn't cover the conference that they have to cover, if that makes sense, is based off of brand. Georgia, Texas, Alabama, and LSU. Do you know what Georgia and Texas and Alabama have in common? They have a brand new quarterback. Do you know what else about Texas? They have all new offensive lines and all new wide receivers. Texas's roster actually compares favorably to the Oklahoma roster that Oklahoma had a year ago. Oklahoma had a tougher schedule, but you could see 7-5, 8-4 happening with Texas. Alabama, if Ty Simpson does not click and they have to go to Keelan Russell, where there's a true freshman at quarterback, Alabama's not going to finish third in that scenario. Georgia, Gunnar Stockton, he's going to SEC Media Days. He's likely going to be the quarterback. But through what you've seen, through the sample size you've seen, which quarterback has made the greater impression of all the newcomers? That answer is Austin Simmons. Austin Simmons had a better drive against Georgia than any of these other new quarterbacks had over the course of their season. Granted, Gunnar Stockton was able to lead a drive to pull out an SEC championship game against Texas. But when you look at what's going on this roster, they're doubting Ole Miss has a good quarterback because they're just expecting Ole Miss to fall back to the pack. Like Missouri. They expect Missouri to fall back to the pack. They expect Vanderbilt to sink towards the bottom of the conference. The only pick that they likely got right on this list is Texas A&M. Texas A&M is a perennial 8-4 football team. They're going to beat some people. They're going to lose some people, but they just always seem to end up there. And with Joey Aguiar transferring from UCLA to Tennessee and Nico going from Tennessee to UCLA, Tennessee probably won that trade. Nico was not good a year ago, and that affected the offense. In Josh Heupel's offense, you need a quarterback that will distribute the football. This list is not good. And I'm sure whenever we go on to Spencer McLaughlin's podcast later on, he will talk about if and why and what is going on. LSU at 4. Best quarterback in the conference is either Diego Pavia or Garrett Nussmeier, period. If LSU has protection across the front, they have a lot of talent. They're the only school in state, essentially. You know they should be pretty good. Sometimes they are. If they are, they're going to be above Alabama. They're going to be above Texas. The South Carolina thing's ridiculous. They're way too high. I think South Carolina's on 6-6 or 7-5 watch this season, and Oklahoma should not be ranked ahead of Ole Miss either. It's just a weird list of what's going on. To put that in perspective, this is what I think Ole Miss is going to do this season. They're going to win their first 6 games. They're going to lose at Georgia and at Oklahoma, and then they're going to win their last 4 games. That is a playoff record 9 times out of 10. It would take a very special set of circumstances for Ole Miss not to make the playoff under that. But we'll see how it goes. Spencer McLaughlin, good friend of the program, all of that. Do not agree with that list at all. That's actually disrespectful to Ole Miss to have them down that low and people going through the same problems that you penalized Ole Miss for, you didn't penalize them. It was basically an assumption, a disrespectfulness. All of that is in play when it comes to those preseason rankings. But at the end of the day, they're lazy rankings. It's just the way it works. But we'll see. I'm sure we'll talk to Spencer McLaughlin a good bit over the course of the season, and he can defend them if Ole Miss is losing. So we'll see what's going on there. You know, Ole Miss out-of-state recruiting has been on absolute fire lately, and the next commitment might be right around the corner. We're talking recruiting next, so don't go anywhere. Ever wish managing your money felt easier with Monarch Money? It can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning for a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than just a budgeting app. It is a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you are also building wealth. When I got to Monarch, I immediately saw how much I was going out to eat and the damage that caused. Actually, I think tonight we're going to Olive Garden, but that's beside the point. Now I've been able to see that and rein it in just a little bit. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONCollege, all one word, at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off of your first year. So let's turn our attention to recruiting. And recruiting is going well, as well as you can expect for out-of-state recruiting. In-state's a different story. We're going to address that in the next segment. We've got an idea, and I think it's a good one, and it's a chance for Ole Miss to take major advantage of what's going on inside the state, almost by necessity. We appreciate the job that Kelvin Bolden and Derek Nix did as the, quote, Mississippi expert inside the state of Mississippi, but it's time to move on to the next level, and Ole Miss is finally in a position to where you can do that. So we'll talk about that in the next segment. So the question becomes, who is the next recruit that is likely to commit to Ole Miss? And listen, in recruiting, something can happen while this broadcast is going on, and it would not surprise me. But yesterday, Chad Simmons from Rivals put out a tweet of an RPM. I think that's the Rivals and On3 version of the crystal ball. Put out an RPM for Craig Tutt to commit to Ole Miss. This is a guy that's been trending that way pretty consistently over the last couple of weeks. Craig Tutt is a 4-star player, nearly a top 100 player in the entire country, according to On3. He's ranked a 4-star on 247 and Rivals, a 3-star on ESPN. He's from Oakland High School in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, right down the road from where I used to live. He is being recruited as a safety type prospect. But let's just be honest about this. Let's just be real for a second. What he is, no matter what he's doing in high school, is the most athletic and best player on the football field. Really similar to Jet Goldsberry. You watched Jet Goldsberry play, and it was comical what he was doing to the competition. Craig Tutt does a lot of that same stuff. This is going to be an Ole Miss Tennessee battle all the way up until the end. Ole Miss has the advantage right now, but Tennessee, being the home state school, you always have to pay attention to that. And the athletic ability that this recruit has is something you need to keep an eye on. Honestly, he plays running back, special teams. He lines up on the back end of the defense. Very similar, honestly, to what you saw when you watched Ladarian Clardy's film a year ago. Is the best athlete on every field that he stepped on. He's the best athlete on every field that he steps on. It is very rare for him to be second best on his team. It's even rare for him to be second best on the field. But he's somebody on the back end of the defense. There's a developmental process that is going to happen, just like with Jet Goldsberry, just like with Ladarian Clardy. When you start specializing after you didn't, there's a little bit of catch up. Listen, specialization in youth sports, that's an argument for another day. But specialization within the sport doesn't happen if you're a supreme athlete in high school. Craig Tutt, Jet Goldsberry, guys like that, they have to be football players. They have to own the football field every Friday night because that's how you get the best out of your team. He is likely the best free safety on the team, best strong safety, best corner, best wide receiver, best quarterback, best running back. All of that is true of this same player. So when he gets to college, the first thing that all these new freshmen go through is having to learn how to specialize. The tips and the tricks that make a good safety, which I think that Craig Tutt is going to be at the next level, is going to have to be learned. He's going to have to rep that stuff to get ready to go. I expect him to be a day one starter on special teams. He is going to be a handful for other teams to deal with on special teams, but it might take a beat or two for him to get on the field as a safety because he has to learn that stuff. It's just the problem of being a really great high school football player going to college. You have to do something that you've never done before, and that is bear down. Listen, I've interviewed Chris Mangum, asked him what point did he realize he had to start practicing more and like getting into being a technician of what was going on. He talked about college, and then he had to learn how to practice in the pros because it's a completely different mindset. It is hard when you are a super elite athlete that everybody is paying attention to. It is hard to understand that you have to work. You have to become a little bit of a technician. In college, it's like a shotgun. It's a self-teaching tool. If you do it wrong, it will let you know. College sports is the same way. If you do not take the time to become a technician, you will end up struggling on the field and end up probably transferring out after a year or two. That is the way it works. But this is the guy that has all of the tools and all of the athletic ability to be a consistent threat for the Ole Miss offense. Now, changing the subject a little bit, first week of August, Deuce Geralds is going to name his commitment. I think he has Ole Miss, LSU, Michigan, Ohio State, and Oregon, I think is his last five. If I got one of those wrongs, I apologize. I'm just doing it off the top of my head. And he has been at Ole Miss every time the door has been open. So you can assume that Ole Miss is at least going to be in the top two. There's been some discussion of who the other team is. It's naturally, everybody thought for a while it was Ohio State. Some people think it's LSU. We will see what happens. Kelvin Bolden going to LSU, that probably hurts a little bit. But Frank Wilson recruited Devin Geralds' dad to Ole Miss back in the day. So we will see if that relationship's there and that happens and the LSU feels happen. But we will see the first week of August what Deuce Geralds selects. And even then, everybody needs to realize this isn't over. There's 9 transfer portal windows. I talk all the time. It is more important to finish in the top 2, just about, than actually getting the kid. That is the way this works. Although Deuce Geralds has been here absolutely every time the door has been open, I think that Ole Miss fans should feel confident about this. I think he has a really good offer. LSU and Ohio State and Michigan and Oregon, they're going to try and get him away from Ole Miss. But in my opinion, that's where I think this is at the moment. So we will see. We are about 3 weeks away from that commitment. Before the football season, Deuce Geralds has a chance. If he was 2 or 3 inches taller, he'd be the best player in college football or high school football. Him being the size that he is holds him back just a little bit, especially in this age of size-speed ratio and metrics over everything in college sports. Should be interesting, and we'll see exactly how that goes. In our final segment of the day, fixing in-state recruiting at Ole Miss might be simpler than you think if Lane Kiffin makes a couple of key moves. We'll talk about that next. When you look at the rivals recruiting rankings, that used to be the On 3, there's going to be some confusion on brands and stuff like that. So just the way it is. But Ole Miss is 16th, 17th, 18th. They're in that ballpark. They are having a fantastic year recruiting. Now, the 247 rankings aren't quite there, but that's more quantity over quality. We're going to kind of put those aside. If you look at average star rankings, they're doing really well. They're just not recruiting a big class. And that is mostly being held up by out-of-state recruiting. When you look at players like Landon Barnes and Isaiah Williams being on the commit sheet, it brings your rankings way up. When you look in the state of Mississippi and see that they have one commitment out of the top 16 players, that changes things. It makes a dichotomy that is honestly odd. struggling that much in state and doing that well out of state. It's bizarre. And nobody is slamming the work that Kelvin Bolden did. Do not hear that at all. But why is Ole Miss 1 for 16 right now? Iverson McCoy was the second highest Mississippian to commit to Ole Miss. He was number 17 in the state. Other than that is Demarius Yates, the running back out of Kemper County. That's one player. I think he's the number 8 player in the state, number 7 player in the state, something like that. This year in state is shaping up to be an abject disaster for Ole Miss, especially in this year. This season was the reason that Kelvin Bolden got the extension. It wasn't because of what he did. Recruiting and the job that he had was all about, what are you going to do for me lately? What have you done? And right now, Mississippi is not going well. Kelvin Bolden famously skedaddled off to LSU. LSU has more commits from Mississippi than Ole Miss does, but Kelvin Bolden's going that way. Good luck to him. I'm sure he'll be fine. How do you fix Mississippi recruiting this year and in the coming years? And the answer to that, in my opinion, is simpler than you think. It requires 2 hires. And if you make those 2 hires, all of a sudden you will have the reputation, you will have the affability of personality, you will have the hard worker, in that if you get these 2 people in charge of the state of Mississippi, you have essentially replaced Derek Nix and Kelvin Bolden in the recruiting strategy of Mississippi czar. And the 2 people that I'm talking about is Mike Espy and Donte Moncrief, both of which played wide receiver in the league. Donte played for several years. He has a really cool song. You can brand that, especially all over the state of Mississippi. Go back, do a little bit of Feed Moncrief again, and get that going. Mike Espy started his own wide receiver, basically academy in Jackson, Mississippi. Think about all the hard work that has to go in and relationship building, all of the stuff that he would be asked to do as a college recruiting strategy guy has been done in the private sector with Espy Performance. Those 2 players working off of each other could absolutely fix Mississippi and put them in a position to dominate for years to come. Mike Espy in the private sector has gone around recruiting high-level athletes to come join and pay money for him to do what he needs to do. That means that that person has the ability to get them to come to Ole Miss. Like I said, Caleb Cunningham and Suntarine Perkins and Cam Franklin, those are the last 3 number 1 players in the state of Mississippi. They came to Ole Miss. Pete Golding, Kelvin Bolden, it doesn't matter who got them there. It matters how you get the next number 1 player and the one after that and the one after that. That is what fans care about. They don't care about who you got. Once the player gets on campus, they just want that player to perform. It becomes a different thing. It's like recruiting and a college player is 2 separate things, but you have to get that signature. And Ole Miss has a personnel department that is one of the larger ones in the entire Southeastern Conference, which means stuff like this doesn't hurt as much as it used to. Whenever you lost somebody like Tony Hughes, for instance, it was a really big deal because of the relationships he built in the state. The offices weren't that big. Now you're dealing with full player personnel. They're looking at college players. They're looking at high school players. Where is the line of who you recruit? Whenever that happens, it becomes much easier to replace the people that left. You just have to be willing to do it. And I think the position that Kelvin Bolden had, and this is honest, this is nothing a slam against him or anything like that. You have to have a great personality. He's a wonderful person to talk to. Absolutely great. He's somebody that connects to just about every person that he's around. And he's an extremely hard worker. He's willing to go on the road. All of that stuff made Kelvin Bolden what he was. You have to go find that. That is what you're replacing. And if you can get the extra stuff, the relationships built by Mike Espy, the reputation of a Donte Moncrief in the NFL, and you have Ole Miss getting ready to take over this state. Listen, the last two Mississippi czars that Ole Miss had was Kelvin Bolden and Derek Nix, both of which came from Southern Mississippi. It's kind of time that Ole Miss puts its stamp on things. And two Ole Miss receivers at wide receiver U coming back and taking over recruiting and being able to tell stories of what it's really like on the campus, not just a recruiting pitch, what Donte Moncrief went through, what Mike Espy went through. That is the conversation that needs to be had. Listen, Ole Miss has an unbelievably healthy collective, not necessarily a wealthy collective, but a healthy collective. Walker Jones talked about needing to spend $1 like $3. Be very efficient. And the quickest way to be efficient in the state of Mississippi is to get Ole Miss people that have a high reputation, that performed really well, that can tell the stories about the times when they were rebels, recruiting players in high school. You can come be me. That is an unbelievably big deal. It's a whole lot bigger than, hey, come up here and be a really good player and all of that stuff, but I didn't come here. It would be a big deal to have two people that actually went to Ole Miss. And I talked to sources last night. They're interested. They would absolutely hear that out. And I'm going to bang this drum because I think they would be very good at that job. Mike Espy and Donte Moncrief, two legends of this century. Mike Espy, what he's done at Espy Performance and basically being a wide receiver coach and 7-on-7 guru, has built the relationships required to do this job. If they were willing to take it and go on and put everything into it, I think they could be absolute monsters doing that. That is just my opinion, and we'll see exactly how that goes. Thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your go-to source for Ole Miss sports. We pride ourselves on offering the most comprehensive perspectives, which is why we are the front door of Ole Miss. Don't believe me? Go to Google, search Ole Miss podcast, and see how much the Locked On Ole Miss podcast comes up. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment on the show. It's completely free, but keeps this show free as well. For your second listen, check out the Portal Show. Brian Smith has the latest rumors, portal entries, and signings. Be the most informed fan on the rapid changes around college football's landscape. Find the Portal on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Hotty toddy, everybody. And remember, analytics is just the old English word that means bad football. We'll see you later.